Right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. My name is William Solari. I'm a student support coordinator with Frisco ISD. And tonight we have the pleasure of hearing from Irene Little, who's a great resource in our community. And she's going to kind of talk about CBD, cannabis, and edibles. But Miss Mayfield is going to do the formal introduction. So I'll turn it over to you, Miss Mayfield.
All right. Again, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Heather Mayfield, and I'm the secondary counseling coordinator for Frisco ISD. So let me tell you a little bit about our speaker tonight. So Dr. Irene Little is a family therapist specializing in addiction, and she's the award-winning author of the book on addiction. She's the clinical director and CEO of Access Counseling Group in Frisco, and she's been treating families impacted by addiction for more than 20 years. Dr. Little has been featured on Good Morning Texas in Billboard Magazine, Parents.com, WebMD, and many other media sources who utilize her expertise to provide information, tips, and resources about addiction and other mental health disorders. And what makes Dr. Little unique in her approach is that she not only is a marriage and family therapist, but she also holds a license specializing in substance use disorders, and she is a speech language pathologist, which means she specializes in communication disorders and learning differences. So as you can tell, we have a wonderful speaker here tonight. We've got to hear a little bit from her this week, and I'm super excited to hear this presentation. So I will turn it over to you, Dr. Little.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be here today, and I'm so grateful that there's so many people joining us. Just a little heads up, my computer is acting a little bit crazy. So to me, it looks like everything's kind of getting stuck and hung up, but I'm going to continue to pretend like that's not happening, and I'm going to move forward. So tonight, I'm going to talk to you about real talk, CBD, cannabis, and edibles. Just as Ms. Mayfield had discussed, I am a speech language pathologist, a marriage and family therapist, and an addiction counselor. And I just love what I do. And so I'm constantly wanting to learn more and more, and I love researching, and I love sharing all of the information that I get with as many people as want to hear it. So thanks for joining me tonight, and I am going to get started. When we started talking about having this presentation, one of the things that we asked when you guys signed up was to send in some questions if you had any beforehand. And so I'm going to try to make sure that I answer as many of those questions as I can during this presentation. And if any of you have any questions throughout the presentation, if you'll just go ahead and put them in your chat box, and either William or Heather will interrupt me and share those with me so that I can go ahead and get that information to you. So today, our learning objectives, the things that I would like to share with you is we're going to talk about fact versus fiction regarding CBD, cannabis, and edibles, since there is a lot of myths going on and a lot of misinformation, and our teens love to tell the parents with such conviction that they know something that we don't. So I want to go ahead and set the record straight on that. We're going to talk about the health risks of CBD and cannabis as well. And when we talk about edibles, what we're talking about is any kind of food that has THC, CBD, hallucinogens in it. So, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about addiction. And what does that mean? What does that look like? So that way, if you have any questions about that, we can try to narrow that down for you. And then COVID-19 has had a huge impact on everyone, but it specifically has had an impact on our students, our teens, and on our substance using population. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as well throughout this presentation. So, I'm sorry, I'm still a little bit stuck and mine is going a little slow. So I want to show you some pictures when we talk about what is CBD and what are these edibles, what does that look like? So I'm going to show you this slide. So here we've got a vape pen, and the teddy bear that you see, it's a gummy bear, but it's made of wax, which is a synthetic, so it's a very potent substance that has a lot of THC in it. So a lot of times what we're seeing is young people are, they're using a process to try to get as much of the THC out of the plant as possible, so that they can get the biggest high possible. So it's not like pot from back in the old days. So what you're seeing here is you're seeing that there's a lot of products that if you don't look close enough, they look like they're just regular candy. So this is Skittles, but if you look really close, you'll see the pot leaves on there. That's how we know that there is cannabis in it. But again, it's something that if your kid had it in their room, you probably wouldn't have noticed that. Instead of Captain Crunch, this is Captain Munch, or Chronic Toast Crunch instead of Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Instead of Sour Patch Kids, we're seeing Stony Patch. So these are your edibles, and then you've got things like CBD, oils, the vape pens, the CBD pens. And I really like you guys to see that what we're looking at is a lot of this stuff is really marketed towards your kids. Nerds, again, the only reason you know it's not Nerds is because if you look real closely, it's medicine, it's Med-Cal is what they've got in here. So that is, so when you're looking at products and you're looking through your kids' backpacks and their pockets and stuff like that, you might want to look really close to see what's going on there. So I wanted to start off with fact or fiction. If it's legal, it must be safe. A lot of times that's what I hear from a lot of people who have this misinformation. I just want to point out that ecstasy back in the 1980s was also legal. There was a period of time where people were using ecstasy. There was no legal repercussion whatsoever. And then we found out that with ecstasy, we found that there's liver problems that come from that, developmental problems, overheating, high blood pressure, sometimes even death. Same thing with tobacco. Tobacco is still legal today, but we've learned, even though when it first came out, there were a lot of tobacco agencies and a lot of information saying that tobacco was harmless. There's no problem whatsoever. It's not addictive. We're seeing a very similar pattern of marketing with CBD and vaping that we saw when tobacco products were first introduced. The long-term impact of CBD and THC is infertility. And I know we're talking about teens, and people will say, well, you know, why do we need to worry about our kids being fertile? Because nobody wants to be a grandparent at this age. However, this is long-term impacts, right? So I've been in the field for over 20 years, and I am now seeing a lot of my patients who I worked with 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and they're having kids. And I'm seeing a lot of kids that are on the autism spectrum disorder. We're seeing a lot of people who are not able to have kids, or they're having multiple miscarriages. This is not just related to somebody smoking pot as an adult, or, you know, this is long-term impacts. We are also seeing now, I'm seeing a lot more kids who are reporting psychotic breaks that seem to be connected to cannabis use, entering into inpatient care and requiring some intense stabilization. And they thought they were just smoking pot. So, and then there's no real dosing recommendations or control. And so one of the big things right now is, you know, when you go in and you get a massage, they'll ask, do you want CBD? The thing is that those massage therapists, our biggest organ, our biggest is our skin. So if we are putting it on our skin, our hands, if we have a massage, if you're working in massage, there's really not a way to control how much of the CBD is in your skin or getting into your bloodstream. So I'm going to get into a little bit more about that as well. So when we talk about It's just pot. Nobody ever died from pot, right? This I hear all the time. Nobody's overdosed. Well, as of right now, there's only been 2 instances that they think might have been connected to cannabis overdose, but that's still something that we're not sure of. However, when we look at the traffic safety numbers, we are finding that pot is the #1 drug found in all fatal car crashes, second to alcohol. So people are dying from it. We're just not connecting the dots out loud. And then I know that a lot of parents have asked, well, I know that CBD has medicinal properties and it's been very useful. So that is true. They have found that CBD and THC could be connected to a medicinal purpose, and it does help alleviate pain. It alleviates seizures. However, the FDA has only approved 1 CBD product, and it requires a prescription so that it can be dosed. So I ask you to think about, when we talk about should we allow our kids to smoke pot? Should we allow them to use CBD because the CBD is supposed to not get you high? The question I have for you is, do you want your teen, do you think your teen is going to make the right decisions on how much that they should be dosing themselves? Or is this something that you would say, hey, I probably need somebody who knows this a little bit better or has an understanding of what an appropriate amount of CBD is to be in charge of that? And again, if that's the case, then it's probably not a good idea to be going into the CBD shops. Again, these shops that are popping up everywhere, they're trying to market this as a supplement or market this as safe, but the FDA has made it very, very clear that there's only 1 product that they have approved to be safe for medicinal purposes, and you do need to have a prescription for it. So, another thing, fact or fiction, I heard that you can't get addicted to cannabis. Hear this all the time. What we are finding is that we're seeing withdrawal symptoms, and the DSM-5, which is the diagnostic manual that professionals use to diagnose and to treat disorders with substance use disorders and mental health disorders. There is now a diagnosis for cannabis withdrawal. So there's very clear symptoms, and I'm going to share that with you later. And so my question to you is, if you can't be addicted, then I wonder how we have this withdrawal symptoms, right? And we'll go into that a little bit more as well. Also, we do know that there's a huge amount of people who become addicted to other substances, such as, heroin or opiates or prescriptions, who also smoke cannabis. And so while you're not necessarily going to end up in a situation where you're going to see an overdose from it, but there are a lot of different accidents that come from it. There's definitely withdrawal symptomology. And when we go over that, I'm sure you'll see some of those things that have happened. And then also, I hear a lot, I can't force my child to stop. I know that, I think there's a little poll here, and I'm just wondering how many people believe that that if their kid refuses to stop using, then there's nothing we can do. I mean, a thumbs up or a, do we have any of that? See how many. So how about, have we had anyone in the group who has experienced listening to their kids explain to them why it's so important for them to be able to smoke pot or CBD or vape? Are we experiencing any of that in our group? A thumbs up or a clap? Yeah. Okay. So when we're working with young people, especially, I know that sometimes we have 18-year-olds in high school, and a lot of parents will say, I don't think, I can't make him do it. He's 18 or she's 18 or 17. I don't know how to make them go to get treatment. The thing is that as long as they're living in your home, as long as they're dependent on you, you do have some leverage. And while we can't physically make them do exactly what we want them to do, there are ways that we can utilize the leverage that you have. There's ways that you can utilize, if you're paying for their car, you can take that car away. I know that it becomes a hassle. I know that it becomes a lot more effort on your end, especially if you're having to work and how do I get my kid into school or get him to his meetings and all these other things that he needs to do. However, it is something that you can utilize that leverage to help motivate your child to do what you feel is the most important thing for him, which is to stay healthy. So we're going to look at these health risks. The brain is not done developing until your child is 25, 26 years old. The last stage of adolescence is complete at 26. So that means that we're still looking at the frontal lobe is still developing. So when we look at that frontal lobe is responsible for impulse control. It's responsible for being able to utilize your judgment appropriately. So when that is still developing and we're putting substances in your body, your young person's brain development is being hindered at that point. Again, we've seen liver injury, gastrointestinal distress, and other heart and blood pressure conditions that are related to using CBD, THC, cannabis, and edibles. The difference between using edibles versus smoking it, and the reason why a lot of people do enjoy that is because they're not having to ingest the smoke. And so smoke is going to cause similar, regardless of where the smoke is coming from, it's going to cause a similar results as smoking tobacco. And so that's why a lot of people will go towards the edibles. Plus, edibles, they can consume those and very discreetly consume them. So, but again, you're looking at these edibles are not packaged or dosed with any kind of consistency. The FDA is not really regulating these, and so we have risks involved with the dosing as well. Plus, you probably don't want, if you have younger children, you don't want the younger children to find these edibles as well, because that can be problematic. We did talk about fertility, social skills. Again, one of the things that we run into with somebody who's using pot and pot products is the social skills can become impaired and impacted. So they're not really learning how to appropriately make friends, or they're not really learning appropriately how to utilize social skills. And so for somebody who has anxiety, they may, what I see a lot of times, if there's a learning difference or a communication difference or something that's impacting a person's self-esteem, feeling like they don't fit in, the one thing that I do see is that they'll say, well, if I'm high, at least I'm supposed to look dumb, and so they don't feel dumb. And then when everybody's laughing with them, they feel a little bit more like they're cool and they're important. And so it does erase some of that low self-esteem for the moment with the negative side impact. However, when a person starts using substances, the maturation process stops. So what we're really looking at is if you have a kid who starts smoking at the age of 14, that's about the level of their maturation. So you see, when your child becomes 16 and they're still acting like a 14-year-old, you want to pull your hair out. You're trying to figure out what in the world is going on. Why are you behaving this way? It's because they haven't really developed those social skills. And so when they get sober, they have to grow up essentially and learn those social skills. Motivation is greatly impaired and impacted with substance use. And then, as I said, there is withdrawal symptoms, and I'm going to go over those a couple slides from now. And then, as I mentioned as well, you also have the risk of your loved one moving into abusing other substances. So by the numbers, what are we looking at? 2018 study indicated that 20.3 million people have a substance use disorder. Substance use disorder is abbreviated as SUD, so that's what that means. Of them, 8.1 million had a drug disorder, and about half were abusing pot. So the most common drug that is being used at this point is pot, and you've got 1 in 27 adolescents who had a substance use disorder in the past year. I know that one of the questions was, how prevalent is this in our schools? How prevalent is this in the Frisco area? Well, it's pretty common, and it's pretty easy to get, especially with CBD. And, you know, unfortunately, now that you've got all of these delivery services and people have multiple means of communication, the phone and Xbox, and just a lot of different ways that people can communicate, what I'm seeing is that people don't even have to leave their house anymore. We've had kids who were on house arrest or who were being very supervised, and they're leaving, you know, they're going to walk the dog, and while they're out there, they're hiding some money under the bushes, and then their friend will come and drop off their drugs on the side of the house, pick up the money, and they'll take off. And all of this is being done while you're not even aware. And so we are seeing 1 in 27 teens needed some sort of help. Out of all of the people who need treatment, a very, very small percentage are receiving treatment. So only 3.7 million people received treatment in the last year, even though 7 times that required it. So I think a lot of this is that people don't recognize that this is a problem. They don't recognize that, you know, a lot of times people will utilize treatment or counseling as a threat or as a punishment or discipline, instead of recognizing this is a problem. This is not something that somebody is, you know, I'm just doing something bad and I need to be punished. This is something that's bigger than them. So, you know, if a person had cancer, would we go, oh, well, you have cancer, so now we're going to send you to chemo? Or do we gather around, lift them up, and say, okay, there seems to be a problem here. Let's get you to chemo. And while you're there, I'm going to support you and be a part of this. That same philosophy has to be applied to this. I understand that the behaviors related to substance use, they're not enjoyable. You've got people who lie, steal, cheat, manipulate. This is because the disorder is much bigger than them. They need love and support, and they need help. So we want to make sure that we are getting people the right help. So what is addiction? Well, it is a disease. It is very much a disease, just like cancer, just like diabetes. It is diagnosable. We can see signs and symptoms. The unfortunate thing about this disease is that people look very healthy on the outside the majority of the time. When they have this illness, it's the behaviors that are really your big indicators that something is wrong. So it is a progressive and a predictable disease. So what that means is that once it's there, it will progress. It's not just going to be stagnant. If it's left untreated, it will grow. It's just a matter of what rate will it grow. Just like cancer, some cancer is very aggressive and some is slow growing. Either way, they still need treatment, right? The same thing with this disease. I've worked with individuals who they had what we would refer to as a very high bottom, and so it didn't take much for them to realize there was a problem. However, every now and then they might go back to, hey, maybe I'm okay. Maybe I can try it again. Maybe it's just a phase. And so we'll see relapses. Again, you see relapses in cancer treatments as well. So we'll see relapses with substance use, and a lot of that has to do with the faulty thinking that goes along with that. I've gone without it for a certain amount of time, so I think I can do this again. But unfortunately, the consequences become more severe, and that's the progressive part. Oops, sorry. The predictable piece is we all know what this looks like. Just like an abusive relationship, we don't really call substance abuse abuse anymore, but I think it's terrible to not, because it is very much an abusive relationship. Just like if you're involved in an abusive relationship, it doesn't start off that way. It's always, oh, everybody feels so good and excited, and oh, you're the best ever. And that's the same experience when you first start using drugs. But then something terrible happens, and you try to excuse it away, and you try to make, oh, well, it was a one-time thing, it won't happen again, we can still get along great. But we all know, just like a abusive relationship, domestic abuse, you know exactly how that story is gonna end if you don't get the help that you need. The same thing happens with substance use. Like I said, here's your cannabis withdrawal symptoms, and it can last up to 30 days from the last use. It usually starts to come on about 2 to 3 days from your last use, and it progresses over that next week. But you'll see irritability, anxiety, depressed mood, restlessness, changes in sleep, such as insomnia. These are also the things that I hear all the time where, oh, well, I have to smoke pot to get some sleep, or it helps with my anxiety, or it helps with my, my headaches and stuff like that. So all of the things that come with cannabis withdrawal are also typically things that people are trying to treat with it. So my question is typically, what's the longest you've gone without smoking? And let's see what happens when you've gone, maybe 45 days. And let's see if you're still having some of these symptoms before we really realize, is this, is it anxiety, or is it anxiety induced by cannabis use? So I want to talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and this is what it looks like. So Maslow says that we all have some basic needs, and he's right. So there's that physiological need. I need to be able to breathe. I need air. I need shelter. I need food. I need to feel safe. I need to know that, I have my family around me, or that I have a place to live, that I have some stability in my world. I need to feel loved and like I belong. These three things, these were impacted for everybody when COVID happened, right? So we got concerned, just like everybody took all the, we used up all the supplies in the grocery store. We couldn't find hand sanitizer anywhere. We couldn't find toilet paper, and everybody started getting very, very nervous. So we have these same fears when we're using substances. However, a lot of times what we found is that people who use substances can make those feelings dissipate when they're using drugs. Same thing happens with COVID. So now you've got an intense level of isolation. You have an intense level of being separated from your loved ones. And so the anxiety continues to perpetuate itself, and that has been problematic. So when people are losing their jobs and they don't know what they're going to do, and for kids, even though it's not important, like it's not their business, they're not supposed to be worried about whether or not mom and dad have a job or can pay the bills. Unfortunately, they pick up on it, or they hear it, or they know about it, And so when they know that mom and dad are scared, their anxiety and their fear, and it increases even higher. So where you may have this level of anxiety, your child is going to also take that on, because mom and dad always have that superhero cape, right? They always are, they're our protectors. They're the people who are going to make sure that we're safe. And so if you're scared, we're scared, right? So when we saw all of this happen, and then we said, okay, now not only that, but now we're going to put these masks on. You're not really able to see each other. You can't be around each other. We're just compounding that fear. And so all of the anxiety has been increasing over and over again. So what I've found is that even with going back to school, some people are going to school in person, some of them are doing it online. But the more that you're being isolated, the more that you're waiting to get back out into some of these experiences, the higher levels of anxiety we're seeing. And so then again, if they're using drugs or if they found it already, and there's so much information on social media and there's so many opportunities to get it, so they find the relief in using substances. So since their basic needs aren't being met, they're isolated and they're fearful, which again are all major, these are relapse factors. So just without COVID being present, all of these things are very common for relapse factors in the first place. So when we have that and everyone else around us is fearful as well, we are going to see much increased level of substance use. So boredom as well. And I promise these kids are very capable of finding ways to keep themselves entertained. And so this is how they're doing it. They're doing it on their apps. They're doing it through, like I said, delivery services. So how can you safely help your child? Well, I would suggest get an assessment. If you suspect your child is using, I'm going to go ahead and tell you they are, and it's probably a lot more intense than you think. By the time you find out about it, that means that they're now getting caught, and that means that they become lazier, and they're not as worried about being caught. So it's definitely been a pattern of use. You can get your kid treatment, get them counseling. I wanted to also explain a little bit about HIPAA. So I've had people come to us and say, well, I don't want the school to know, or I don't want my job to know. And people are afraid to utilize their insurance because if I use my insurance, then people are going to know. HIPAA is a very strict law. It was an act that was created to make sure that people who have a substance use disorder get the treatment they need. So there's a protected health information that you're not allowed to disclose information at all unless you have a release. However, HIPAA goes even further. So this even protects your records. So really most insurance companies aren't even entitled to those records, which is why you have to sign an additional release to allow those records to be disclosed. And if somebody were to go to court and subpoena the records, then there is a HIPAA objection. So the courts have found that you cannot be compelled to share this kind of health information related to addiction, even by the court, if objected to correctly. So we want to make sure, and the government wanted to make sure that people would not be prevented from getting help just because of the fear of it being used against them. Also, if your child has a substance use disorder, they are protected by Americans with Disabilities Act. This is a disease. It does fall under Americans with Disabilities Act. And so there are protections. The other awesome thing about that is there's also a lot of resources available to help people with substance use disorders. So your job is also protected. If you need to get your child help, I have a lot of parents say, I can't miss work. I cannot leave work. I'm missing so much because of my child. Well, FMLA protects your job. And so your counselor or treatment center will be able to fill out the paperwork appropriately to keep your job protected. And you don't have to disclose that to your boss. You only have to disclose it to your HR department, and they can't disclose it to anyone else. Another way to help your child is to drug test often, drug test randomly. If there's a holiday or your kids stayed out a little bit longer, or maybe if you just suspect or you haven't done a drug test in a while, make sure you drug test them. Check their phones in their rooms, check their pockets. It's important. I understand that most people think that our kids deserve privacy. While I'm not interested in watching my child take a shower, I am interested in what he's talking about on his phone. I'm interested in what he's bringing into his rooms, in his pockets, because that's on me. I need to make sure my kid is safe. I need to make sure he's safe in my home, and I need to make sure he's safe outside of my home. And all of this information is yours. And if something's found in your home on your phone, it's going to fall on you as well. So you want to make sure that you're checking in on that. Plus, the more accountability, the less likely your kid's going to go out and do, they're going to use, because they're going to be able to say, hey, I can't. My parents are watching everything I do. I'm getting drug tested. And so, believe it or not, their friends don't want them to get in trouble. So a lot of times they'll say, okay, well, we don't want you to get in trouble. Don't even bother. Also, limit their cash. I know that there's a lot of cash apps now, Venmo, Zelle, where people can now send money to each other. But the less cash that your kids have, the better off it is. And if your kids do have bank accounts, monitor them. Make sure you know what's going on with their spending. So how do we handle your stress? How do we handle anxiety? First of all, the more that your kid has been on virtual and not really been out, you're going to need to walk them through it. Talk about, how do we manage stress? What do you do what do you feel? What's your body feel like when you're stressed and anxious, right? Or is it tightness in your chest? Is it tightness in your throat or in your gut? Is it cramping? And then talk about some breathing techniques, right? Taking some slow, deep breaths, remembering that it's going to be okay. Making sure that you have opportunities to talk about it and process their feelings. Well, what did you do with that worked well? What did you need help with? Help them explore some hobbies. I have found that kids will tell you through their interest what they love doing. So if they love doing YouTube or music, help them do something positive with that. Get into it. Get excited. I had a kid who loved music, and so his parents really got behind him. They supported him. We really pushed into and leaned into that hobby. And, I've seen many families say, oh, it's just a dream. This actually became a big deal, and now he's an international DJ, and he became very successful. So if we lean into what they love, you'll be amazed at what they can do. So counseling is not a punishment. Remember that. So this is a tool. We're going to help you. I've had families say, well, I want to get them to help and I want to get them into counseling. However, I can't get them there. Yes, you can. This is about helping them and motivate them with their currency. What's their emotional currency? If they want to drive, well, maybe that's one of the things that they can drive you there, and maybe they can have a little bit extra time with, maybe they can have an extra, 30 minutes out with their friends or whatever it is, but come up with some currency that they really enjoy and utilize that to help them get what they want, get a win-win for both of you. There are some young people, Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous groups. There's some church youth groups. There are pretty much anything that your kid can be interested in, there will be a group for it. So let's help them find a group where it's going to be a group of young people that are fun, exciting, and have similar interests, but also that have goals and motivations. Make your home a safe place. Make it a fun hangout. The more that they're there, the more you're going to hear things. So improve and increase that. I also like to teach refusal skills. Again, if I'm drug testing, my kid's much more likely to say, I'm sorry, I can't use, I get drug tested all the time. And kids go, okay, that's cool. So also, you know, walking through, hey, how often do you hear about it? How often do do people approach you? And what do you say, right? Your kids have information for you. They know what they can and can't say. So just kind of walk through that and ask them what do they need? And then let's come up with alternatives and backup plans for, what they can say. So mean what you say and say what you mean. That is huge. When it comes to boundaries, please be clear on your boundaries and please be clear on your follow-up. Your kids will tell you exactly what you need to know through their behavior. If you say to your kid, if you come home late, then you're not going out this weekend. Sometimes they come home late so that you will take that privilege away, because sometimes they don't have the ability to tell their friends, I don't want to come to this party because I don't feel safe. Listen to your kids' behavior. Let them count on what you say. Those boundaries are everything. So I think we are about, I wanted to just kind of make sure. Yeah, accountability, that's the other thing that's really important. I have found that unless you require accountability from somebody in recovery or from any kid actually, then you're going to see them trying to get away with things. So if they say they're going to be somewhere, make sure they know that you're going to follow up. Make sure that you check in on them. If you say, I'm going to check your phone, ask them about things you found in their phone. That's important because they need to know that you are watching, that you mean what you say. So I am gonna, we have about 20 minutes left, and I wanted to make sure that I had enough time to answer some questions. I can talk about this topic forever, and so I try to make sure that I leave enough time and enough room for specific questions. Let's see, do we have Heather or William, any questions that have come in?
No questions have come in yet, but I just, again, ask people to put their questions in the chat.
Okay. Okay, and I don't know where the chat is, so, one of the things that came up, one of the questions were, what's the slang? So when you are looking through your kid's phone or text messages and notebooks and stuff like that, so some of the slang terms for CBD or pot, so we've got oil or hash oil, but it's oil for short. If you see the number 710710, that is oil upside down, like the mirror image of it. And so sometimes you'll see that. Green, nugs, nuggets, bud, shatter, dabs, wax, let's see, trees or herb. So those are things that you'll hear or see. Of course, July 10th, which is 710, or April 20th, which is 420. Those are pretty celebrated holidays for people who smoke pot or hash or do edibles. It's a very big deal. They'll have National Smokeout Day, 420 at night, or in the afternoon. That's also a pretty popular time. So if you see those things, those are pretty much an indicator that your kid may be having conversations about pot.
Can you, Dr. Little, one of the questions was how many types of CBD oils are there? And also, can you talk a little bit about, kind of the difference between what you see at maybe the convenience store towards the difference of a CBD shop and kind of some of the different ways that they're trying to market it to make it seem like it's safe.
Yeah. Well, in fact, that's exactly what they're saying is it's safe. They're saying it's safe and it just helps relieve tension or helps chronic pain. And it's amazing how many people now have chronic pain now that we've got CBD popping up everywhere. So yes, you can find it's unfortunate too, but right by the checkout of the convenience stores, you'll see CBD edibles, and the packaging is all different. And sometimes it'll have bright colors, and sometimes it'll say, we're going to give you energy or what have you. I couldn't even begin to tell you how many different types there are because, unfortunately, it's an infinite number right now. There's just so many of them. They're all packaged differently. I know right now it's real big. There's a multi-level marketing company that they're selling CBD, and so now you get to do multi-level marketing. And they have this little bottle. It's about this big. And I went to an event about 7-8 months ago, and somebody had come up and they were so proud of this stuff and it's so great and it doesn't have THC. It's just so good for you. It's all natural. And I'm going to give you this bottle. It's normally $125, but I'm going to give it to you as a sample. And then if you like it, you can go ahead and order more from me, or you can buy in as this multi-level marketing. So this has become a huge, huge money-making business. And I think a lot of people are pretty well aware that this is pretty similar to what we saw with ecstasy back in the 80s. So there is a lot of misinformation about it. And, again, the FDA and the CDC they're still trying to figure out, they've got to test all of these different kinds that are on the market. And I can tell you that there was a school counselor who purchased a bottle of CBD, and it was marketed saying that there was no THC in it and that it was all natural, everything was good, it was completely safe. And then she hid it and asked the drug dog to find it, and he did. So what that says is if the drug dog is trained to find THC, then these bottles are being marketed, these CBD products are being marketed saying that there's not THC, and in fact it is. It in fact does have it. So there's a lot of misinformation, and the packaging is it's not informing people correctly. I also have had people reach out to us saying that they're losing their jobs because they're failing drug tests related to CBD. And again, if you're utilizing the wrong CBD that is mislabeled, then unfortunately you're stuck with the consequences.
Okay, and that kind of leads to, we got a couple more questions here. Is there a difference between CBD oil used for cosmetics and chronic pain? And then also a couple questions about, what the FDA is doing in terms of preventing these shops from popping up everywhere. And do you think it'll ever be banned in our country?
I think it's going to be much more regulated for sure. I know that I have had interactions with the DEA. I have a few friends that work for the DEA, and so we have a lot of interactions and talk about CBD. And so FDA is not necessarily going to be regulating or shutting these places down. It's the DEA that is. And so the DEA, which is the Drug Enforcement Agency, and they have been shutting places down like crazy and doing a lot of research, trying to find these places that are marketing incorrectly. And so, yeah, they're going out, they're buying it, they're testing it, and they're trying to shut these places down. So I do think that it will get regulated. I don't know if they're going to shut it down completely. But I can tell you, when you see all of these multi-level marketing and all these, people jumping in, I mean, they're going to make a lot of money. I do think they're going to make a ton of money off of it. but at what expense and what cost. This is, to me, it looks very similar to the end result of the tobacco industry. It was a very, very big deal. It was, they minimized the side effects, and then now we've got people who are, they've been dying for years as a result of the carcinogens. That's the other thing too with THC. There are carcinogens in THC, and so that information keeps being left out as well. So, so those are. I hope that answered everything.
Yeah. What about, we had a question about testing your kids, and how long does the positive test, like how long after this child, consumes the product, are you able to test afterwards and still get a positive test? And then also, can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing in the community in terms of adolescents and also just community use?
Yes. So drug testing, that's another thing that's misinformed as well. And I apologize for not mentioning that sooner. So kids will say very convincingly, well, not just kids, adults as well. Oh, well, I smoked pot and it stays in your system for 30 days. That is not an accurate statement. So I also had a drug testing lab for a long time, and it's not accurate. So if you're smoking a lot, if you're smoking like Snoop Dogg kind, then yeah, I would see that. 30 days would take a while. So, and we have had people who smoke that much, but you're talking about daily smoking. So if you're drug testing your kid and you're having consistent positives, especially with the at-home drug testing, I would suggest bring it to a lab, get it tested further so you can have the numbers and you can see how it's leaving their body. Because one of two things is happening: either they're continuing to smoke for 30 days, telling you that, well, it stays in their system. But typically, I have seen people who they'll smoke and then within about a week, it's out of their system. So, which is why you want to drug test pretty randomly and pretty often. And then what was that other question?
Dr. Little, it was paraphrased a little too much. The question is, what's the average age for the beginning of experimentation with marijuana or edibles in Collin County and in the nation as a whole, if you know that?
Yeah, so I've been doing assessments for a very, very long time, and I can tell you that what we see is the age of experimentation is typically around 12, 13 years old. And then when it becomes problematic use or consistent use is about 14 years, 15 years old. And then by 16, we definitely have a lot of substance use disorders at that point. And the research also indicates that when a person starts using their substances, for anybody who starts using drugs and or alcohol at the age of 15 or younger, they're 4 times more likely to develop a substance use disorder. For each year that they wait, they reduce their risk by 14%. So what we found is that for people who started using substances at the age of 21, only 10% of those people developed a substance use disorder.
All right, we have a few more. Where do you get tests that you can do at home?
Great question. So you can get those at Walmart, CVS, or you can order them from us. Walmart and CVS, I think I've seen a 5-panel for $55. And when I say panel, it's 5 different drugs. And we have drug tests that we sell for $14.99 plus tax. And so you can purchase those from us as well. So, and they read just like a pregnancy test. They're really simple. It's an instant drug test. And then we have, and then you can also get a drug test ordered to go to maybe Quest or another lab if you want to. Mm-hmm.
All right. And here's one that I missed. Can you tell us more about those e-cig looking devices that are sold as relaxing only? that don't, that kind of look like incense, or maybe the person was told they're more like incense?
Yeah, so they all smell really good. That's the thing. Now that they've come up with the vaping and they've got all these juices and flavorings, they all smell really good. So now you don't know the difference between what has THC and what doesn't, what has hash oil in it or what doesn't. So those vape pens, the unfortunate thing is you can get those. They can smell exactly the same without nicotine, with nicotine, and with or without THC. So one of the things that I like to explain when people get addicted to vaping, sometimes there's that physical dependence on the actual process of it. The reason that there's so much relaxation and calming that happens so quickly, it's not because, you know, the initial part, if there's a physical dependence, is it's the process of taking those deep breaths, holding it, and slowly letting it out. Those are some coping skills for helping to reduce anxiety and stress. And so that's why you have such an instant reaction to it. You have, even when somebody's smoking, it's going to take a little bit more than a couple of puffs before they're going to have the actual chemical reaction to it. So I encourage people to utilize that same breathing technique to help calm themselves. Also, a lot of times you can't vape inside, you can't smoke inside, so you have to step away from the stressful environment. Again, that's another coping technique. But all of those devices operate with chemicals, and it involves inhaling stuff into your lungs that your lungs aren't designed to consume. And so all of that is doing damage to your lungs. And so while you may be getting a calming effect, you're also doing internal damage, and some long-term medical consequences can and will come from that.
All right. And I think we have time for one more. Are there any tests available to the public so that the chemical substance is detectable longer than the urinalysis test? Maybe a hair strand test?
Mm-hmm. So there's a hair follicle test. One of the things about your hair follicle test, they're taking the root. And so that can test, it can go back, depending on how short or long the hair, they can do 90 days, sometimes even longer, for testing for different substances. And pretty much any substance that you can test with urine or blood, you can test with your hair. And so we have also, we also can do those. We would send it to an outside lab, but that is one thing that can be done. Nails, so fingernails also can be tested. And again, those are a little bit more costly as well. And in a court setting, so if you're looking at like family courts and stuff like that, they're going to be doing more like hair follicle testing and nails as well. And then of course we can do blood. So, and then each drug has a different length of how they process through your body. So urine's just the most stable. You can store urine either in the fridge, or you can store it at room temperature and still be able to test it for a long period of time. So that's why, and it's easy to get to. We also do oral swabs at our office as well. So if we believe that somebody is getting high, but their drug test isn't showing up, then we do an oral swab. So they put the swab inside their mouth and hold it there for a while. And then we take that and send that off to the lab, and we can test that as well. So that's been really useful as well. And then, oh, there's another one, and there's it's a drug patch that they put on your skin, and that will also detect as the substance is being eliminated from your body, it'll go onto that patch, and then that patch gets analyzed at the lab.
Okay, awesome. Well, Dr. Little, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for spending your time and energy and just sharing all of this wonderful information with us. I know it helped us. that are working with students, and I know it helped our parents as well. So hopefully you had a chance to write down Dr. Little's information if you need it. Please feel free to reach out to her if you have any additional questions after this, or to Mr. Solari or I, and we will be glad to help you find any other resources that you may need. So we will end the meeting now, but thank you so much for being here. Have a wonderful, safe night, and stay warm, everybody.
Thank you
Thanks
so
so much.
much.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.